Welcome to the Know, I'm Mica Burton. Could Ubisoft finally be making some headway against its fight with Vivendi? For months, the French conglomerate has been approaching hostile takeover territory with Ubisoft, but now the company finally seems to be fighting back. Reuters is reporting that the Guillemot family has increased their ownership to 13.6% of Ubisoft stock and 20.02% of the company's voting rights. That puts them a bit more in line than they were previously with Vivendi, who has 27% of Ubisoft stock and 24.5% of the voting rights. It's uncertain if this will ward off Vivendi completely, but at least it gives them a bit more of a chance as far as voting is concerned, so keep fighting, Ubisoft, we're rooting for you. The votes are in, and now we know which E3 games were considered the best in show, as far as critics are concerned at least. Leading the votes for best overall game at E3 are Assassin's Creed Origins, Super Mario Odyssey, Mario + Rabbids Kingdom Battle, Shadow of War, and Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus. And the games which received the most nominations across all the voting include Wolfenstein 2, Mario + Rabbids, and Shadow of War, which all took honors in at least 4 separate categories. So now you can argue with your friends about which of those games will be better until they're actually out later this year, and we can all play them and then continue the arguing. Bungie continues to be extremely candid about their upcoming blockbuster, Destiny 2, and now they're being even more brutally honest about some of the first game's flaws. In a new interview with Games Radar, Destiny 2 director Luke Smith had some criticisms about Destiny's story in particular, as did we all. When asked about what the biggest difference between Destiny 1 and 2, Smith said, "I think broadly speaking, it's probably the inclusion of a story. It's actually focusing on having a followable narrative and having a big sort of storyline, epic scenario." Smith went on to say that there will be other stories to follow throughout the game as well. I think there are words for that in our video game vocabulary. Side quests, perhaps? Imagine that. But hey, Destiny, at least you admit your flaws. We're proud of you. Outside of video games, people still seem to have the question of whether or not games can be considered art. But according to one developer, video games are arting harder than everybody else at the moment. Fuck real art, man. This quote comes from Wolfenstein 2's director Jens Mathies during an interview with Metro Games Central. Mathies said, "We have this art form that is considered the lowest of the low. I consider it gaming the highest of the high, because it encompasses all other art forms. To me, it is the pinnacle art form at this point in time." Having seen that trippy, drugged-out lizard sequence from the trailer, yeah, we'll have to agree. PC key reseller G2A has found itself back in the headlines again, only this time it's because an indie developer is blasting them publicly on Twitter. Slime Rancher developer Nick Popovich posted an email he sent out to G2A, and it was pretty colorful. When G2A reached out to Popovich about Slime Rancher joining their next bundle, Popovich replied, "I'll have to pass on working with you and your shady company. That's terrible for devs and consumers alike. I really hope awareness of the garbage fire that is your business continues to grow." He went on to say, "But have no fear. I'm sure Slime Rancher keys will find their way under your site's claws whether I like it or not." Oh, so maybe G2A will get the last laugh after all. While there's been a history of Japanese games sometimes being dumbed down for Western audiences, the creators of the new Monster Hunter say that that won't be the case with the upcoming Monster Hunter World. Despite some fears of the game being simplified for the West, executive director Kaname Fujioka said everyone will get the same version. IGN reported that Fujioka said, "We're not taking things that people in the West hate and fixing them to make the Western players buy it. People sometimes make that assumption or they've got that fear, but that's not the case at all. So there you go, we will all get an equal chance to bash our heads against a wall because Monster Hunter." There's been a rumor going around that Ben Affleck won't return as the Caped Crusader in the upcoming Batman movie, but it looks like the director has put that to rest. Matt Reeves said in a recent interview that yes, Batfleck will still be starring in the movie. The production has already had a number of issues, to say the least, with Affleck originally scheduled to direct it and then backing away and yada yada yada, but it's good to hear that he will be reprising his role because honestly, he was like one of the bright spots in Batman v Superman, but don't look for The Batman in theaters anytime soon. Reeves said the movie is only now beginning production. Could communist Superman be coming to the big screen? Maybe. DC is possibly looking at a big screen adaptation of the Red Sun graphic novel, and if you're not familiar, the 2003 comic told an alternate universe story about Superman being raised in the Soviet Union rather than America. Mark Miller, who wrote it, mentioned that Warner Brothers is apparently pitching the story to various directors. Even more interesting, Miller spilled those beans in a Twitter conversation with director Jordan Vogt Roberts, who said he had pitched the Red Sun idea to Warner Brothers a few months ago, but it was surprise, surprise, turned down. We'll see if anything comes of this, but needless to say, an anti-American Superman would be very interesting, you know, if it ever gets made. A big ransomware attack has hit a bunch of companies across Europe, Asia, and possibly the US. So far, the hardest hit country has been the Ukraine, where hackers targeted the national bank, the country's power provider, an airport, and a number of other companies. It's already been called the biggest attack in the history of Ukraine and left a number of government officials locked out of their computers and ordinary people unable to access their bank accounts. The ransomware, which is called Petya, also popped up in more than 80 companies across Russia, England, and India, with hackers demanding $300 in Bitcoin to unlock the affected computers. It's been spotted in the US too, so please make sure you've got the security updates installed and don't open any strange files, as tempting as it may be. So who showed the most games at E3 this year? The answer might surprise you. Finder.com counted up all the games that were shown at the event and found that E3 had a 60% increase in new IPs compared to last year. As for which company showed the most games, that honor went to Microsoft, who showed off 45 games, more than Sony, Nintendo, Ubisoft, and Bethesda. The next highest was Sony, who showed off 30. Of course, if you believe Microsoft, all 45 of those games were exclusives! Which they weren't, but it's still an impressive showing. More games is always a good thing for us gamers. Well, that is all the news we have for you today. For more news and updates and such from all the internet corners, all of them, except that one. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the know. So now you can argue with your friends. Sorry, it feels like there's a spider on my back. It's actually focusing on having a followable narrative and having a bit of a storyline epic scenario. A big sort of storyline. Being dumbed down for Western audiences, the creators of the new Monster Hunter say that they won't